We are so thrilled to be partnering with Hinge. Hinge is the dating app designed to be deleted. As you all know, I'm a huge Hinge advocate as I met my partner of almost 3 years on the app. Even before meeting him, Hinge was always my go-to app because I met more relationship-minded people here and had some great dates. Clearly, I haven't been on the app for a little while, but I re-downloaded it to check out some of the new features. One that stood out to me was the voice prompt, my best friend's take on why you should date me, where your friend can hype you up. Not only does this make the profile creation less daunting, but it's not always easy to see your own green flags. So to test it out, I asked Yue some fun prompts to get her take on what I could put if I was dating again. So the first one, how long have we known each other? What was your first impression of me and how has that changed?
Julie and I have known each other for almost 10 years. My first impression of Julie was that she's very social, but I've learned that she has a lot more depth to her beyond the social butterfly that she is.
My next prompt, what do you think are my green flags?
I would say she's deeply loyal. She believes in love, curious mindset, and she is fearlessly ambitious.
And then last but not least, what kind of friend am I?
Julie is the kind of friend who will always have your back, no matter what.
Damn, that feels nice to hear. So download Hinge and try voice prompts today. Then find someone worth deleting the app for.
The Dateable podcast is an insider's look into modern dating that the Huffington Post calls one of the top 10 podcasts about love and sex. On each episode, we'll talk to real daters about everything from sex parties to sex droughts, date fails to diaper fetishes, and first moves to first loves. I'm your host, Yue Xu, former dating coach turned dating sociologist. You'll also hear from my co-host and producer, Julie Krafchick, as we explore this crazy dateable world. We are back for season 15 of the Dateable podcast. This seemed like a really long hiatus for some reason, but it wasn't.
No, it was actually shorter than normal because we ended up throwing the bonus one with Roe v. Wade. So it's actually shorter than intended, but I agree. You know, we've just been gone for too long and we're about to change that.
Well, I think the reason why it feels like it's been a longer hiatus is because Julie and I have been working on something kind of secretive. We've alluded to this before. Let's just say we're bringing you more content in a different way, but the same sort of insights and the same tone as we've always brought it to you on Dateable. So it's been keeping us busy. So it just feels like we've been gone longer because we've been working on this other thing, which you'll all find out soon and we won't be as cryptic going forward.
Yeah, I feel like we have a few other things going on, but this is probably the one that will be announced the most recent. But also, we've been hard at work recording season 15. So I feel like some of that too, I'm like, I want to put out into the world these conversations that we've had. And I keep feeling like we can reference them because they're already out, but then realizing that we're just ahead of the ball this season.
If you think about it, it's every new conversation we have, we take away a few new nuggets. But because we haven't broadcast these episodes, it's almost like you know a secret and you can't talk about it openly yet. That's how I feel. But I'm glad this episode, we're premiering with this one because there was just so much to be said after this interview with Rob Mack.
Yes. And you all probably remember we had Rob Mack. Was it 2 seasons back at this point?
Yeah.
I believe it wasn't last season, but the season before. So season 13. And he is a happiness expert. Yeah. But of course, when you ask people, are you happy? Aren't you happy? Dating, relationships, love inevitably comes into the picture. So thereby, by default, he is now a relationship expert as well, or a love expert. I don't know if that was his intention starting out, but it has come together for him. But we love Rob. He wrote a new book, Love from the Inside Out. And immediately when we saw this, we both said to each other, we need to get Rob back. And he needs to be the season opener.
Do. And just as a refresher for anybody who can't remember who he is, or maybe you haven't listened to the previous episode, he's someone who was so down on himself at one point in his life where he became suicidal. And he said, I need to get myself out of this. And this search for happiness became his mission. But in that search for happiness, he realized happiness is a default for all of us. It's not something we get just because we get that job we want or the relationship we want. We can tap into it anytime we want. And that's been the most powerful insight from our previous conversation is happiness is our default.
Yeah. And we are shedding light into how love is also our default in this conversation. And I must say, I kind of had this newfound appreciation for our podcast. I know this sounds weird, but as I was editing, said from the person that makes the podcast, I don't know if I'm losing credibility there, but I feel like something about this episode and where I am in my current life hit home. And as I was editing this episode, I cried. I admit that I cried.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't be that big of a shock because Yue and others know that I cry easily, even when I'm happy. So, I mean, it's an achievement from the content, but it also, this is kind of my state in general. But part of it was my partner and I, things are going great, but we are kind of struggling with some timelines that we both have the same vision for our future. We just are, bringing different life experiences into the picture, different ways of thinking. And it's something we're navigating through. It's not a bad thing. I think that's just a part of the course with a relationship, that you're not going to always be 100% aligned on every last thing. Two people with two different thought patterns. And I had this conversation in therapy, and my therapist was saying, maybe you should spend more time alone. And I thought to myself, why would I do that? The whole goal is to bridge us together. And it didn't hit until I listened to Rob's episode with Love from the Inside Out. The love within you is so core to everything and to how you love other humans, and having that found appreciation isn't something that, changes based on who you're with, but it's always there. And fostering that self-love is just as essential. And I'm not saying I don't have self-love now, but I do think when you're in a relationship, it is easy to just do things all together all the time and lose a little bit of yourself. And regaining that sense of self, I do think is so important. So it was kind of this perfect storm of, therapy setting in, Rob's comments, and I just hit for me. And, a lot of people have written into us saying, okay, I needed that DTR brunch talk right at this moment, or I needed this how to get over rejection. And I think that is something that's so wonderful about this podcast, is we are able to meet people where they are with the back catalog of many, many topics we've covered.
Maybe we are syncing menstrual cycles, because I feel like I'm going through something very similar. And I've been spending a lot more time alone, kind of soul searching, because I realize, one part of me is I can't count on my partner to be everything for me, right? We've talked about this so much, but it's harder to put into practice when you spend time together. You kind of expect your partner to create this partnership that is totally idealized in your head. But then I was listening to this. Okay, you're going to think it's funny. I joined this hypnotherapy app. Okay. This guy gets on and he kind of hypnotizes you over the app. It's not really hypnotherapy. It's really like meditation. But he said, every day we have these magic moments that we can look for. But because we're just racing through life, we don't stop to think about what those magic moments are. And it dawned on me that my magic moments, I've been kind of relying on my partner to create these with me when I could create these magic moments myself. And in this meditation / hypnotherapy, he said, recall back to a time you experienced a magic moment by yourself. What is something that you ventured into, something new, an exciting place or an accomplishment? And I thought about the time I traveled through Italy by myself, and I just sat at the top of this mountain in Cinque Terre and looking down and thinking, this is a magic moment, and I can still create that for myself. So I'm so with you on this, Julie. It's not about pushing partners away. It's actually making yourself more of the pillar in your life so that you can be a stronger partner for the people in your life.
Yes. And my therapist actually suggested solo travel, which is funny. But I think, honestly, listening to this episode, and Rob has such an emphasis that love comes from within. And, obviously, human connection, the people in your life is important, but ultimately you hold that power. And it actually made me appreciate what I have with my partner more. And I'm definitely someone, I feel like I've been guilty of being like, okay, I'm getting older. We don't have as much time, and maybe like abiding by timelines a little more. And it definitely changed my perspective of like, I need to just appreciate what I have present and the love that I have with my partner. And it doesn't mean that you can't want these things and build a life towards these things. But this episode that we did with Rob definitely helped shed light on, we talk about it in here and a lot more, so I won't go too much on that. The relationship is the container and love is a part of that container.
And then he does also emphasize presence. And I think that's a problem with dating and also just everyday life for me is that I'm constantly 5 steps ahead of myself.
Yes.
That I put so much pressure and anxiety on myself for something that hasn't even fucking happened yet. When I can't just, sit still and shut off my brain for a minute. Because when you shut off your brain, that's when you realize all the good things that are happening around you. And you can be more grateful for the moment that you're in, instead of thinking of all the things that you don't have in a future that you have no control over.
Yeah. Last season, I feel like our theme was being intentional of your love life and how do you start to figure out what you want and how you get what you want? Maybe this season, it's appreciating what you have a bit more because I think, we are all guilty of that. The 5 steps ahead is dangerous. And I think women especially, not to generalize because it's everyone, but women were almost like programmed to think 5 steps ahead. It's good in some ways because it makes things happen, but it's also does detract from current day.
Okay, can we just actually talk about this? I know we don't like to talk in generalizations, but I find more and more proof of this.
Yes.
Okay, my parents were packing for a 2-week trip to Alaska, okay? And so I came over to help them, and my mom had already packed for the entire trip, including the 2 days they come back, like what are they going to eat after they come back? My dad was still thinking about what he was going to wear on the plane. Like the guy has not even gotten past day 0. And that was just, to me, just watching this, I just had this moment of thinking this is exactly the difference between men and women biologically and mentally is like women are always thinking 1,000 steps ahead. You've gone on a trip, but you've already planned your entire trip. You've already been there. You already traveled it. And men are much better at being in the moment, but also men are a little bit behind. It was like my dad was like a step behind. So then how do you get 2 people to not be so frustrated with each other? Because my parents were definitely very frustrated with each other. They were just not aligned on where they were in their packing.
I hate gender stereotyping too, but this is true. I'm sorry. There's all evidence. I've talked to so many girlfriends about just, how did things progress with your relationship? And they all basically were like, I needed to do it.
Yeah.
I feel like men are change resistant overall. And it definitely causes disconnect because also you don't want to feel pressured and you don't want to pressure your partner. But it's hard when you're steps ahead not to feel that if you're steps behind. So how do we bridge that gap? Because I think this shows up all the way from the first date, where I think men in general, I've read a lot of studies about this, that they're assessing the date more of just, how do I feel in this moment?
Yeah.
Am I having a fun time? Where women are like, is this going to be my future husband? Do they have earning potential? What are our babies going to look like? It's a whole deal. And it really is jarring because that does cause people to feel like they're not on the same page. And that is challenging whether you're the one ahead or the one behind.
I like to really explore this, Julie. Maybe we can find an expert who can either prove us right or prove us wrong, because I like to know if there are biological implications to all of this. I even think about how women just have so much on our minds all the time, just because, okay, this is going to sound very superficial, but from clothes to accessories to makeup, all the things we have to think about because we have access to them, and our roles are keep changing. So the roles that we're trying to portray, or the perception of the roles that we are assuming. But for men, I feel like there isn't as much of that stuff, the distractions or the things to balance going on. And I could totally be wrong, but I would like for an expert to come in and say, biologically, women were born to balance and juggle so many more things.
Well, there are stats and experts that have said that women are better multitaskers. I think that is an actual, the way brains are developed is different in that regard. I do agree we should get someone to go in a lot more depth, but it is a very fascinating thing that keeps coming out. But
we need it. We need it so bad. I don't know if you've encountered this too. I feel like I'm also the optimizer in my relationship. Optimize the weekend, pack it in, optimize our days, optimize our meals. And my boyfriend's simply like, I don't want to think about that. I don't want to think that far ahead, and we don't need to pack it in.
I just did a trip to San Luis Obispo and Paso Robles. I've learned that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah,
not Robles,
yeah.
Which is what I and everyone else calls it.
Yes.
Which is basically Central California. It's right between LA and San Francisco. And I went with a girlfriend of mine and her partner, then my partner. So it was a double date trip. And the two of us planned the entire thing. Every aspect of it.
Of course you did. Because if you didn't, nothing would fucking happen.
Well, that's the problem, right? It's like you don't want to be the one pushing, but also you don't want nothing to happen because then you just get frustrated, and that's where it is. But anyways,
okay, we can go on and on about this.
I digress, but I think regardless of your stance, definitely write in and tell us if you've been in similar situations because we would love to dissect this topic much further.
Yes. Okay. But to other topics, I guess we are very happy to be back for season 15. And we are also very happy we've survived all the way to season 15. Whew. I don't know how we've kept this up for almost 7 years. We say this all the time, but this is our longest relationship ever. And it's going and it's growing. So thank you to all of you who've stayed with us throughout the seasons, but also for any of our new listeners, we so welcome you into the Dateable family.
Yes, we made a really fun teaser video. So if you haven't seen it yet, follow us at Dateable Podcast on Instagram. It's also in Love in the Time of Corona Facebook group. I think it's pretty much everywhere, but go to your preferred platform pretty much. But I loved seeing some of the comments, especially on Instagram. I think that's where most of them were just of, oh my God, I'm so excited. I've been counting down the days. I love you guys. Like, you changed my world, like all this stuff. Sometimes, again, even though we've been doing this for 7 years, it almost feels like it's just Yue and I talking, or it's Yue and I talking to a guest. And it's really helpful to keep us motivated to hear those types of comments that we are impacting your life. And I love getting those emails of, I needed this right now because I definitely related with this episode, and hopefully others will relate with this episode and all the episodes.
Yes.
Okay, so some announcements before we get into it. You've already heard. Follow us at Dateable Podcast. Our TikTok is growing too. So if you are a TikTok user,
220 followers, guys.
I feel like we had like 25 before, so it's getting better. This is why we need to put the plug out.
My dog just looked up when I said 220.
He's like, oh, that's not
a lot.
Mojo not approved.
I don't want to be associated.
Help us get to 1,000. That's the goal. But even more of a push, help us get to 1,000 reviews. We know there is way more than like 600 of you out there, which is currently our reviews. We get it. Writing a review sucks. Usually you only write it if something is really bad or someone instructed you to do it. But help us out. Let us keep giving this great content. That is the number one thing you could do today. Leave us a 5-star rating and review and share with a friend. Sharing is caring. Someone else will benefit from this episode. We know it.
Yes.
Okay. Well, before we get into the episode, let's hear a message from our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by Aurelia. Julie, I think it's time we pamper ourselves with some beautiful lingerie. What do you think?
Oh, hell yeah. That's why I was so excited when Aurelia reached out to us.
Yeah.
Aurelia is a premium curated lingerie and sleepwear subscription box with 100% 5 out of 5 client ratings.
Yeah, legit. The fun part is you get to customize your box. You fill out this style quiz about your sizes and preferences, and then they curate 2 to 3 pieces of lingerie or sleepwear per box.
I love that. And the best is that it's delivered to your doorstep. I remember I hated going lingerie shopping because it's so freaking awkward to be doing something that intimate in public.
Seriously. So the privacy was a major selling point for me. And also they're hassle-free and saves you time and money. And I like that you can try on different styles and get more adventurous that way.
And they also only carry premium brands like Panache, Parfait, Midnight Bakery, and so many others.
Love those brands. Shipping is always free for the US, UK, and Canada. And not to mention, Aurelia is owned by a fabulous woman of color. And for a limited time, Dateable listeners get 10% off their first monthly or seasonal box.
Yes, just enter the code DATEABLE10 at checkout. Go to aureliabox.com, that's AURELIA box.com, and enter the code DATEABLE10 for 10% off. Okay, let's hear it from Rob Mack. Love from the Inside Out.
So glad to have you back, Rob, with us, and congratulations on the new book, Love from the Inside Out, Lessons and Inspiration for Loving Yourself, Your Life, and Each Other. So good to see you.
It's so good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yay! Just a reminder who Rob is. He's 40 years old, lives in LA and Miami, originally from Pennsylvania, single and actively going on dates. He's a positive psychology expert, celebrity happiness coach, executive coach, and author of the book, Happiness from the Inside Out. We talk about love quite a bit on our show, and everyone seems to have their own definition of love. But when we talk about love, it's about receiving love, getting that validation of love from others. And your book is truly about finding love from the inside out. So let's just start with, we love to hear, what is your definition of love?
Yeah, it's a great question. My definition of love is your self-love shared. It's your happiness shared. We could go deeper and say that it's the experience of felt oneness with life itself. So there's life within you and life within me, and it's that shared experience of felt oneness that we all live. For those folks that are a little more esoteric or abstract, I'd say that it's the peaceful aliveness you feel inside your body, we'll call it that. I think lots of us get this idea that love is an exclusive relationship that you have with just one person. And usually it's a romantic exclusive relationship that you have with just one person. And I think that's an extraordinarily limited way of looking at love. For me, love is an inclusive way you have of relating to everybody and the entire world. So it's more a trait almost than it is a state of emotion. And I would go further than that and say it's not a state of emotion. It's not really a state of mood. Ultimately it's a state of being. And so it's really more about love as a state of being as opposed to this roller coaster ride that we call dating or relationships, with the ups and downs. There's a more stable, sort of lasting, meaningful, and abiding experience of peaceful aliveness or love or happiness. I think those are all beautiful synonyms for what we call love that I'm much more sort of inspired to share with people.
I love that. This reminds me of our conversation from last time, talking about happiness as a state of being. It's kind of your default. I really want to know what inspired you to write this book.
Yeah, it's such a phenomenal question. Look, 20 years ago or more, I decided I was going to become a happiness coach. And I thought that as a happiness coach, I'd get phone calls from people who were unhappy and were, owning their unhappiness, and I could help them with that. And I discovered that's not the case. Most people were calling because they were struggling or challenged with relationship stuff, usually romantic relationship stuff, but sometimes platonic or professional relationship stuff. And they were often simply saying, my boyfriend sucks, my girlfriend sucks, I don't have a husband, I don't have a wife. And so I felt like in that process and experience, I really wanted to help clarify some things for folks, including myself, so that we could all experience more happiness, more peace, and more love more consistently without having to wait for someone else to be what we want them to be or say what we want them to say or think what we want them to think. I wanted all of us to experience a more unconditional kind of peace and love and happiness. So it really came from that place of wanting to clarify for people some of the myths and misconceptions and flawed premises that we all operate under without being always aware of it.
There was a part in the book that I really loved because I feel like you and I hear this a lot, and we have realized that this actually kind of is the demise of a lot of folks, is this overthinking pattern that we feel like we need to think our way through everything. And especially with love, especially in the romantic sense, you're so afraid to not make the wrong choice or to not get hurt or whatever it might be that we tend to go to this crutch of overthinking. What are your thoughts about how much thinking should play into the act of love?
Yeah, wow. I've thought about this one a lot. Right.
Obviously.
Thought about overthinking a lot. And, I would say that, it's easy to understand why we all overthink everything in our lives, especially love. It seems like such a difficult experience to attract or to enjoy or to keep or maintain. And so it's understandable why we do that, both for reasons based in sort of nature, but also nurture. The challenge is that most of the thinking we do around love is aimed at trying to get inside the other person's or other people's heads. And even when we do that well, it doesn't work out, all that beautifully or all that, and isn't all that productive for most of us, because we end up just getting in the way of this really fun, playful, enjoyable, and meaningful connection that we have with each other. If there's one thing that can be said about love, it's that it's presence. And presence is nothing if it's not overthinking, right? Presence is like, let me keep my mind where my body is. First and foremost, that's the introductory sort of elementary level. Just let me keep my mind where my body is. That's the way the actor Vince Vaughn describes it. I would go a step further and say the graduate level of presence is not only keeping your mind where your body is, but keeping your mind quiet, cool, calm, and composed while it is where it is. And it doesn't mean you can't have a fun time. In fact, you have a much better time when you're not lost in the past or the future. You're just present with the person you're with, not with an agenda, not with an expectation of reciprocity, not trying to script or plan or plot every single thought or word or move.
When you went into the research for this book, and you also alluded to this earlier too, is that we have these myths about love. And even the phrase finding love, Julie and I have a problem with that because it makes it feel like you're in control. So if you're ambitious enough, you can find love. What are some other myths that you really address in this book as well?
Wow, that's what you said there is so poignant. It's true. Love is not an achievement, accomplishment, or an acquisition. So it's not something you achieve, acquire, accomplish. It's an acknowledgement of something that always exists within you. We'll call it as a state of being, but you often feel love even when a person that you're not with or aren't with is or isn't around, right? You can feel independent of who is around and who isn't around. So that's the first piece, is that, love is not something you achieve, accomplish, or acquire. It's something that you acknowledge always exists within you. I think also love is, most of us look for love in all the wrong places. And those places are outside of us, in the future, and occasionally in the past. You will never find love in the future. We'll never find it in the past. And you will never find it outside in the world. You can have and experience all kinds of relationships with people, and you'll have a feeling of love that you'll then attribute to the other person. But the truth is that, we'll call it feeling or emotion in this particular case, was something that was in you all along. Those other people and other conditions and circumstances encouraged you to feel this love or this happiness inside of you. But that love and happiness or peace is always within you. So I think that's kind of the primary flawed premise, is that love is something outside of you that you'll find or attract in a future that essentially never arrives.
This is so counterintuitive to what modern dating is and what we're told we're supposed to be doing, right? It's getting something, and you're basically saying it exists within you, and it's about releasing, essentially, to also, find, I don't want to use the word find, but almost, attract someone else that's releasing love into the world. But why do you think then we have this mentality in society that this is something that we need to achieve? Because we definitely feel the same way, that it feels like, you got the milestone, you need to get married, you need to have kids, you need to do all these things to be a complete human being. And that drives so much of our actions. Why do you think that is?
Oh, so many reasons. I'd say that first and foremost, it's, part of it we can blame sort of nature for. The brain is wired to achieve and accomplish and acquire. We'll call it self-preservation, but that's how we stay alive, right? We stay alive by looking for things we need, for avoiding fear and danger and risk. And, the brain is really wired to avoid problems, and it does that by seeking out problems to solve, right? So love feels like a problem that you need to solve. So there and then, almost an implicit assumption that if you need to solve it, the problem or the solution isn't available to you here and now. It's something you've got to find in the future somewhere out there in the world. So part of it is a sort of, I think, a nature challenge that we're presented with. And, the brain is essentially well-intentioned, if we can, assign attention to it. But it doesn't always play out well in our personal lives, even our professional lives, but particularly around love. The other part is simply just nurture. If we pay attention or notice most of the messages and stories that we receive from the media, from TV and films, from very well-intentioned parents and priests and philosophers and poets, you often hear this sort of bad bill of goods that's sold over and over again. And it often, there's an inference there that it's all about something you achieve in a future that you find, when the right person happens to stumble into your life. So, I get it. There's something kind of romantic about it for sure. And I would say that most cases with love, and say all cases with true love, reality is sweeter than our stories about it. It's much sweeter than that. It's much more accessible and available than that. So yeah, it's both nature and nurture.
The premise of romantic love, we've also addressed this too, is people treat it like it's different from other types of love. I think about the unconditional love I receive from my pet. I have no expectations for my dog Mojo, but I love him regardless. But when it comes to romantic love, we have these gateways. I think people think, well, we're not aligned on our future goals, our intentions for this relationship, then I am not able to get to the point of love. What do you think about that mindset?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? First of all, we enter into relationships often with an agenda. So,
yes.
Then you wonder at some point, are you really interested in loving someone else or being in love with someone else, or you're just in love with the idea of your own ideas and your own expectations, right? Often relationships you're really into two people who are in love with their ideas of the other person. It's their ideas they're in love with, their own ideas, not the other person at all, right? So I think that's in and of itself highly problematic. There's of course great opportunity there too, which is like to love who and what is in front of you here and now. The other point that you make is a really valid one, which is we often think of romantic love as different from, familial love or from platonic love, but it's really not. There's really only one kind of love, if we can call it a kind. There's just one, right? It's that felt oneness that you share with all sentient beings. It's just one. And sometimes if we mix sex in there or physical attraction in there, chemistry in there, then we call it romantic love. But that's something that love is not different. They're not sort of differences in love. There's just one kind of love, and you can call it your true nature, but it's that peaceful aliveness that you feel consistently all day, every day, that you're mostly or usually or consistently not aware of at all, right? It's just always there under the surface. And when the right person comes along in the right way, we feel it bubble up to the surface and we call it love and we attribute it to them. All of that is a little bit misleading. It doesn't really speak to the truth of where love is and how we can experience more of it.
I think this is hard because I could feel myself conflicted on this too. It's like I understand the pureness of love, but then also there are things in life that you want. So you want to make sure that if you're going down a path with someone, that you're on the same path. And, whether it's society's influence or whatnot, sometimes you do want to get married or have kids or whatever the future holds. How do you balance the two? Because I feel like we're told, be smarter about dating. That leads to thinking, which leads to overthinking, which becomes problematic. I'd love your take on this, Rob.
Yeah, I feel you. That sort of inner conflict that you're speaking to, I think resonates with most all of us, including myself. The truth is you can love everyone, but you don't need to like everyone. You can love everyone and you don't need to spend your life with everyone, right? You can love everyone and you don't need to be in a romantic relationship with everyone, right? So what I'm trying to encourage people to do is one, experience the kind of unconditional, immovable, unshakable love that doesn't come and go like the wind, right? That isn't dependent on other people and other places and other things to be just right. So you can experience this fleeting thing that we call love. So I'd say that is sort of the first piece, which is just, just because you feel something for someone doesn't mean you need a relationship with them. And just because you want love doesn't mean it's only excluded to romantic relationships. You can love someone and not be in a relationship with them. You can be in a relationship with them and not love them, right? And so we just want to discern. Now, in addition to that, I'm definitely a believer in do what you can to find, or if you're going to connect with someone, and you want to be in a relationship with someone, you do want to be on the same page in terms of values and lifestyle choices. And that being said, love is not agreement. Love is not agreement. It is not two heads that are always in agreement with each other about all things at all points in time. Love is, not two heads in agreement. It's two hearts in alignment, right? And so there's something that comes or that is greater than agreement. I'll call it alignment, but it's two people that have just set an intention to be love, to be loving, and to do what you can to support each other in feeling loved, right? That in of itself should take precedence over whether or not you agree on politics or religion. And that doesn't mean that politics and religion don't matter to some extent, but they matter mostly because you're wondering if this person is a good person. Do they have a good heart, right? And so I think we all fall victim to that quite often. We say, just because we don't like their opinion, we must not love them, or we can't love them. It's not true. I think we confound these things like intellectual agreement with something deeper that I'll simply just call alignment.
Mm-hmm. What I'm kind of gathering is like we almost conflate relationships and love. And like, of course, love is a component of a relationship, but it's not the entire thing. And, you know, we had author Mark Manson on this podcast a while back, and his whole thing was love isn't enough. Like it doesn't conquer all, essentially. And I think that's kind of where I'm hearing from you, Rob. And I'd love for you to elaborate more because I can see you want to.
Yeah, gosh, it's just so insightful. I love having a conversation with you all because you're just so insightful. You're clearly so well educated in this space.
We overthink this.
Fair enough.
We're like telling people not to be overthinkers. We are the queens of overthinking.
All we do.
So
yeah, those are the best kinds of guides and coaches for not overthinking it. People that have experienced it. Same reason I do what I do, right? Yeah. So yes. So you can think about relationship as the container and love as the content of that container, right? Relationship is the form that formless love takes. And this is where we, often get lost. Love is formless and faceless, and it can take any form that it, quote unquote, wants to take. So in the beginning, maybe it was a friendship, and then it turns into a romantic relationship. And then later you realize, you're not meant for each other. So you separate, and now it's a divorce, and now you're friends again, or maybe distant friends again. But the love doesn't have to, shouldn't serve the relationship. The relationship should serve love. And I think that's part of what I'm wanting to sort of remind us all of is that, love is the highest value, not relationship. And we actually sort of prioritize relationships above love. Relationships often end up becoming, not always, but often, it's like two security seeking individuals, sort of get in a relationship with each other and create this ironclad contract, then locks love out. It's like you enter a room and the room has fresh air and you're enjoying the fresh air and you're like, I just want to keep this fresh air in this room. It's just so good. So you shut all the windows, you close all the doors, and you're like, what happened? It was so fresh when I walked in here. It's so stale now. Open up some windows, right? This is essentially what we do consistently with relationships, and for good reason, but also for reasons that are questionable. It's jealousy and envy, and we want often to possess someone. I mean, love is, if it's one thing, it's certainly not possessiveness. It's not possession. It's freedom living and freedom giving experience. That's, I think, both the challenge and the opportunity. Are you really interested in love? Or are you just interested in a relationship?
And just going off of that, when you're locking in a relationship too, why is this so many times we feel like we need the permission to love? Like if we love first, we've lost in this game of love. Why is it so hard for so many people to say those words and to lose in some to some extent? Because it took my partner and I over a year to say I love you because those words meant so much that we didn't want to use it too quickly. That permission is very interesting to me.
It is indeed. And I love that we've all been in those kinds of experiences before where you just want to hold on and wait. And, there's something also kind of sweet and beautiful and really exciting about knowing that you've got this next thing that you get to experience when you actually use the words. That being said, for lots of us, there's also this egotistical or ego-driven piece to that, which is like, I don't want to be the first one to say it. I want to continue to have power in the relationship. I want the power in the relationship. When the other person loves me more than I love them, or they tell me they love me and I haven't told them, I hold the power. I hold the cards, right? And again, that's not love. That's the ego talking. And I get it. We all have a lot of, can have a lot of that or a little of that going on. And this is part of the reason I wrote the book too, is because love, it's anything, is called the reduction, not quite the elimination. As long as we're alive in these bodies, we're going to have some ego, showing, surfacing, that it's very helpful, keeps us alive. But relationships are often end up being these ego-driven experiences where two people are more obsessed and committed to power plays than they are having a loving experience, right? I think there's a great quote somewhere where something like, like an obsession with a love of power, where there's love of power, there is no power of love, right? And so that's the idea. It's like, are you in love with power or are you in love with love? If you're in love with love, you love for loving's sake alone. You love the cashier, you love your partner. And doesn't mean you necessarily want your partner to go out cheating or seeing other people. I'm not saying that, but it does mean I want my partner to be happy. I want my partner to be happy. If you're not happy, it's not love. So love is happy. And if it's not happy, it's not love. Love is free. And if it's not free, it's not love. That's ego. That is ego. Why would you ever want anyone else to suffer, right? Just to make you happy. It's like, you can do that on your own. It's your job. They can do that on their own. It's their job, right? But yeah, I think that's important to remember, that often what goes by the name of love is anything and everything but love.
I feel like ego is the number one thing that gets in most people's way of finding love and having love with others. And I know I've been there before where I've definitely held back because of ego. And, there's even times currently that I'll like resort because of ego. Like, how have you, first of all, have you ever been in this position, and how did you kind of work your way out if you have? Because I feel like it's always helpful to hear how you get to the other side.
Oh, I've experienced all the things, Julie. I mean, all of them, for sure. And how do you get out? Well, I think awareness is the first step, right? So I think what happens often is you notice these things about yourself or others, and instantly you end or land on some kind of judgment about it. It's wrong. They shouldn't be doing it. I'm wrong. I shouldn't be doing it. You want to let that aside. If love is anything, it's non-judgment, right? It's non-judgmental awareness. So just being aware that maybe you're coming from a less than healthy place, from an egotistical or ego-driven place. Just being aware of that. Just notice it. Don't feel compelled to change it, to do anything about it. Just notice it without judgment. Already, love has, quote unquote, entered the room. And that loving awareness often does the work itself. It does the transformation itself. Early in my experience, I would get in there and really try to fix it and force it and change it. And like, I can't be this way. And all I did really was repress what I was really thinking and feeling. And then it would surface later at some point in some really uncomfortable way, often with lots more pain and suffering, along with it. So just that awareness, that non-judgmental, loving awareness, or why you might be doing what you're doing. And if you want, you can explore that. You can go a little deeper. The challenge and the key really isn't to think about it so much, but just to notice. That noticing is transformative. That loving awareness is transformative. So I'd say really that. If you just did that, you'll find pretty soon, like eating something that feels really bad for your body, you just don't have as much interest as eating as much anymore. And then the next time you want to eat even less. And then before long, you're not eating any of it at all. You're like, this doesn't feel good when I eat that.
That's such a great way of putting it. And it just reminds me of the times that my mom's given me love advice. Find someone who loves you more than you love them.
Yes, I hear this a lot. I remember the first time I heard it and I was blown away. And I get it because it can feel
safe. It feels safer, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You have the upper hand, right? It's a power play. Oh, I can do whatever I want because my partner loves me more than I love them. It's so funny to me now. It's just hilarious to think that she used to give me that advice. What about this notion that you were speaking about earlier, is looking for love in all the wrong places? Because I think a lot of our listeners would immediately go to my city. It's the apps. It's the people. What is finding love in the wrong places?
So it's in the world. All worldly places are wrong places. That means anybody or anything outside of you. What we often do is we say, oh, I'm so interested in love. I want to be in love. I want to experience love. But really what we want to do is extract love from somewhere else. Okay. It sounds like so sweet and so pure but it's like we're trying to extract. It's like, can I just give you enough that I can get back what I'm really ultimately wanting? Right. But if you think about that, it's like, even if that were true, that you can give enough to get back what you need. I mean, you're giving something. What do you call that? It's got to call it love. I don't know what else you call it. Right. But the idea essentially is that, if you aren't deeply self-loving, if you aren't truly deeply happy, you are sort of like a beggar. It's like you're completely broke, poor, and you're looking for someone in the world, and you're going out into the world, and you're looking for someone who, in all likelihood, is also very much that same thing. They're also broke, right? They're also poor spiritually, psychologically, emotionally. So you've got two beggars that come together in an effort to make each other better off. That never works. They will make each other worse off. They will fight and they will argue about what the other person should be giving them, but that person doesn't have, and vice versa, right? So yes, all worldly places essentially are wrong places. When you discover this infinite source and well of love that exists within you at all times, you can also call it happiness. You'll be surprised because you begin to find it everywhere, begin to see it everywhere, you begin to experience it everywhere. And then you get into relationships not to be or to become happy and not to get love. You get into relationships to share the love that you have, to share the happiness that you have, to share the self-love that you have. And it's great if they reciprocate it. We love it. And if they don't, it doesn't matter. There's always more where that came from. But it really requires someone who's clear enough to recognize or realize that love is its own reward. It's so good. Just a good example. Just this show. It's fantastic to have this conversation. I love it so much. And if if it never went to air, okay, if I never heard or connected with you all again, I would, it will, right? I would, right, it definitely will. And if it didn't, I would say, my gosh, like, how can I have a single complaint? I just had the most incredible interview, the most incredible conversation with the most brilliant, beautiful people and souls ever. And I experienced that first and foremost. So whether you did or not, irrelevant, because I experienced it. If I get it back from you, wonderful. It's icing on the cake, right? And so it is true that the more you give, the more you get, and it's exponential in nature, but you do have to first be able to access that place from which and from where you can give it almost endlessly without a concern or worry that it's going to be reciprocated. That ultimately is where we want to be. It can feel aspirational for most of us. That's just fine. But it's good to remember that other people don't hold the keys to your love life.
I love that so much, but I'm also thinking like, I feel like that sounds so difficult because we're wired to be like, what are we going to get in return, right? That is the way we're wired inherently. I think we're maybe American culture, maybe in other countries too, is inherently selfish. Like we're the center of everything. How do you start to free yourself from those like stereotypes?
Tit for tat.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting. So, and you make a great point, and I don't disagree with you at all. I remember I read recently a book called Humankind, and it's all about the innate goodness of people, and it's really contextualized within history. So author does a great job of just talking about the ways in which we're actually, yes, on one hand, we can be quite selfish. On the other, we're incredibly generous and kind and loving for no good reason other than it's just part of our nature. It's who we are. And so I'd say first, it's looking for evidence that that's true, that we are innately loving and kind and generous, even the worst of us, right? I mean, think about how many times you open a door for someone, you let someone out in traffic, you give somebody some money, you lend somebody something of yours. You know, all these things that you do, you get out of the way of someone else. You know, just these things, these little things that you do all day long, right? You're patient with someone when maybe they haven't earned it or deserved it. You know, you let somebody go in front of you in line. Whatever it is that you do, just notice how often you do these incredibly loving, generous, kind things with very little to no expectation of reciprocity or expectation of reward. And in some ways, you could even argue that maybe you're a little worse off for it, objectively speaking. But notice also how good you feel in doing it. So the first thing is to recognize that even the worst of people still have their moments, right? They still have their moments. The other piece of it is just to notice how much of that love or that peaceful aliveness or that happiness is within you all the time, right? Like even now, you can just feel into your body. There's a peaceful aliveness in your body. There's a vibrating energy in your body, in your hands, in your feet. Think about the ways also in which we all continue to receive these priceless gifts from life or existence itself. I mean, the oxygen, the air that enters and exits our lungs. Think about the ways in which your lungs love you, the ways in which your heart loves. I mean, when do the lungs or the heart really ever get a break or take a break? And do they ever complain? You know, rarely. You might have something happen, you know, heart disease or something, sure. But think about the ways in which life and existence ceaselessly and endlessly and unconditionally supports us all, even just physically. It's kind of mind-blowing when you realize how much we are all surrounded by love, you know, and of course the negativity and the hate all get center stage because it's great clickbait for the brain. You know, the brain is always trying to solve a problem, and if it can find a problem to solve, it's even happier. So just notice the love that you're drowning in already and the love that you extend unconditionally without an expectation of reciprocity already. And just notice the ways in which life or the universe or existence loves all of us, even the worst of us, endlessly, unconditionally. It's just helpful to notice the love that already exists within you in your life already.
I'm so intrigued at this because I think maybe it's immigrant mentality, but I feel very petty with my love. If I'm holding the door open for someone, I expect a thank you, and if they don't, I murmur something like, oh, you're welcome. There's this idea that I grew up with, is like, you don't want to be taken advantage of.
Yes.
So if you give and you don't receive it back, then you are being taken advantage of. How can, well, I guess personally for me and people who may feel this way, shift that mindset to think, love, there's abundance of love, and let's just keep giving it.
Guilty also.
Yes, same, without question. So two things. First of all, notice that when you open the door for the person, your initial inspiration, incentive to open the door had nothing to do with an expectation that they would thank you. Just think about it. Did you think beforehand, this person looks like someone who's going to thank me? I'll open the door for them. Not at all. You just open it. That's how natural it already is. And yes, and then the brain gets in there and says, why the heck did this person not say thank you? So ungrateful. I'm not going to do that again, right? So I get it totally. So that's the first piece. And then also I think love, being loving doesn't mean not having boundaries. It doesn't mean being boundaryless, right? In fact, I would argue that the people who are most genuinely loving, meaning they are love, they exist as a state of love, meaning they are aware of their infinite eternal connection with the source of love itself, are really the only people that, one, love truly, right? And second, they're the only people who have healthy boundaries because they know that the source of this love is within them. So if they have to cut someone out or off, or they have to set a boundary with someone, there's nothing at stake. It's only the people that are truly struggling or challenged or don't or haven't found this source of love inside that really struggle with the boundaries. It's the people that aren't self-loving that struggles with boundaries the most, not the people that are deeply self-loving. So it's like, if you're infinitely wealthy, do you worry if someone stole $10 or $100 or $1,000? You don't. You lock your doors. You don't give away your bank account numbers. Okay. But if they stole it, then you take care of it and move on. But it doesn't disturb your peace in the way that it would if you were completely broke or if you had hardly any money, right? Same thing with love.
Let's hold that thought for a few messages.
This episode is sponsored by Via. We all know there are things that can help set the mood in the bedroom, but did you know a little THC could also do that? Yes, Via has developed a unique blend of pleasure-enhancing cannabinoids, libido-strengthening herbs, and a low dose of THC all into one mind-blowing gummy called High Love. This gummy, wow, it will awaken your senses, increase blood flow, and intensify any sexual experience. I've been pleasantly surprised by the High Love gummies because it is just the right amount of THC for me to have a good time without feeling sleepy. And hey, if THC is not your thing, Via also offers a wide array of other gummies without it. And everything legally ships in 50 states with discreet packaging directly to your door. So if you're over 21, you can get 15% off and a free pack of award-winning Dreams THC plus CBN sleep gummies with our exclusive code DATEABLE at viahemp.com. That's VIIAHEMP.com. Let the gummies work their magic. Head to viahemp.com and use the code DATEABLE to receive 15% off and one free sample of their Sleepy Dream gummies. That's viahemp.com and use the code DATEABLE at checkout. Take your passion and pleasure to a whole new level with High Love from Via Hemp. This episode is made possible by Badlands Pets. As you all know, Mojo, my precious baby, is the reason why I found love in the first place. He made me feel love again. So I would do anything to ensure his health and longevity. And actress Katherine Heigl and I have that in common. She's helped save over 16,000 dogs through her foundation. And after doing a ton of research, she feels there's one place we can look to improve any dog's health, and that's their food. So fortunately, she found that just by adding a few special superfoods to her dog's food, she saw huge transformations in their health. So she's made a 20-minute video explaining step by step how anyone can do the same thing to see incredible changes in their dog's health. I've definitely re-looked at what I'm feeding Mojo and making sure that, hey, he only has one life to live, and I want to make sure it's the best damn life. So if you want to keep your dog healthy and happy, go to badlandsfood.com/dateable and watch Catherine's video right now. Again, that's badlandsfood.com/dateable. Living with ADHD can be a challenge, and dating with ADHD is definitely a challenge, we've heard many of you say. But finding the right care and proper tools needed to succeed can be life-changing. Done is an online ADHD care platform that can get you all the resources you need to help manage your ADHD. Online visits, refills, and a 24/7 care team made for you. In just 1 minute, Dunn's online assessment can help kickstart your ADHD treatment journey. With experienced clinicians, worry-fill refills, and online visits, you can start getting personalized care as soon as today or tomorrow. So contact an expert team that can help you around the clock and get a personalized treatment plan just for you. Here's how you do it. Take a free 1-minute assessment and book an appointment with a licensed ADHD clinician as soon as the next day. Get continuous care, one-click refills, insurance coverage, and 24/7 care team support with Dunn for just $79 a month, and pharmacy copays as low as $0. Visit get.dunfirst.com/podcast to learn more. That's get.dunfirst.com/podcast to learn more. Done. Turn ADHD into your strengths.
I love that. And I'm like, going back to the earlier example that we're talking about is like this notion of love is a component of a relationship. And the question of, how do you balance what you want in life versus love? What I'm gathering here is, let's say you do want a family, and whoever you're with is not on the same page. It doesn't mean that you stop loving them, but you have the love that you can say, like, I actually want this in my life. I'm going to find a partner that's aligned with me. I'm a good student. Rob is giving me a
great
clap.
teacher. You're a great teacher.
Okay, it's clicking. That's where we're going with this.
Absolutely. You can say to someone, I love you so much, and I would love nothing more than to spend my whole life with you, or the next 10 years, or whatever it is. And I really want kids. My life would feel more complete if I had kids. Okay. Or my life would feel more complete if I moved to Bali and I live there. I know you want to stay here. I love you. And so I love you so much, and I love me so much that I'm going to continue loving you. I'm going to continue loving me. I'm going to make this decision. And who knows what tomorrow will bring, or the next year, or the next lifetime will bring. But I'm not going to use anything or anybody as a reason to stop being love. I'm going to continue to be love. Mm-hmm. And I can also make another decision or another choice. Love doesn't mean doing what the other person wants all the time. It's not it at all, you know? And I know that I struggle with that a whole lot because I'm a people pleaser, feels like by nature. And I want everyone to be happy all the time. And I want everyone to feel loved all the time. So that's often meant me betraying myself. But self-betrayal is still betrayal. In fact, I'd argue it's the highest betrayal, right? Mm. It's still betrayal. It's the highest betrayal. If you betray yourself, who's left to love the world, if not you, right? So it's important to be clear. Love is formless, and it can take many different forms, and it doesn't have to come at the expense of your own happiness. In fact, if it does, I would argue that we need to explore whether that's love or not.
Right. And I think that also is a good point with, you know, these situationships or like anything that's not fulfilling to you, kind of what Mark Manson was saying, love doesn't conquer all. You can love someone, but if that's not actually good for you in the long run, that self-love and having that should be, if not, like you're saying, more important than, you know, the love for that person.
Absolutely. And I love Mark Manson, and I have to agree with what he said there. I love it. And I want to add a little personal nuance. So human love does not conquer all. That is absolutely true. In other words, people break up for all kinds of reasons, even when they love each other. Okay.
Yep.
And often for good reason, and hopefully to the benefit of both of them.
Yes.
That being said, what I might call divine love or conscious love is something that does conquer all because it includes and embraces all, right? So the kind of love that I'm talking about is a state of awareness, a felt oneness that exists within all of us that ultimately is us. And so there's nothing ultimately but that. There's nothing but this felt or this oneness that we feel all the time, but we're only aware that we feel sometime, right? And so I would say that kind of love, that sort of divine love, this conscious love that exists as sort of, we call it peaceful aliveness. It's always there. It's always there, that even in your unhappiness it's there. Even in your loneliness, it's there. It's the very foundation, the very ground of your being, so to speak. And you know that when you fall asleep at night and you're about to drift off in that moment right before your eyes close, or maybe when they've closed and you haven't quite lost consciousness, there's the most blissful, peaceful aliveness and happiness and love almost, you can call it that, in that moment that you experience regardless of who is or isn't in your life, and regardless of whether you're in a relationship or not. It's always there underneath, above, beyond, between, and below all thoughts, feelings, emotions, perceptions, and sensations.
I love that distinction.
Would you say then that self-love is the highest priority? If you had to
the highest form of love,
put them in a hierarchy?
So I would say that ultimately there's only one kind of love. I'll stick to that. There's only one kind of love. And to your point, the self is another word for love. And love is another word for the self. And it's the one self that we all share. Okay. So when I think about self-love, particularly in a traditional sort of way, at first it's just looking for the best within yourself. Okay? Just looking for the best within yourself, highlighting that, focusing on that. And then eventually you go deeper than that.
Yeah.
And you realize that I have a body, but I'm not a body. I have a mind, but I'm not a mind. I have a personality, but I'm not a personality. There's something that's aware of the mind that isn't the mind. Something that's aware of the body that isn't the body. Something that's aware of the personality that isn't the personality. We'll just call it awareness. It's your true self. It's the essential self that's never changed. When you're 4 and when you're 100, that sort of thoughtless, wordless awareness that you have a body or that you have a mind, that is your true self. When you're aware of that awareness, we'll call it love. We can call it peace. We can call it happiness. We can also just call it the self, the true self. So that true self of me is the same true self of you. The life force that's within me is the same life force that's within you. When I'm aware of it, when I'm tuned to it, I call it love, but it's always love. It's just that now I'm aware of it. And so yes, self-love, I would say, if we want to say it in a way that people can sort of digest, self-love is the highest love, and yet self-love is the only love.
I'm all for self-love, and I 100% agree with you, because like I know personally for myself, when I got to a place of, not needing a relationship and just being content with who I was in my life and happy, that's when I found a relationship, or that's when I invited a relationship into my life. But I feel like at the same time, so I'm 100% agreement, I also feel like the word self-love is so cliche at this point. You think of like affirmations and, self-help books and all the stuff. How can you break it down for folks, Rob,
Yeah.
of like more tangible ways that aren't as cliche of like, what does self-love even mean?
Yeah. So we can do it in sort of at levels. So I'd say the low-hanging fruit, to your point, is often what you hear there in self-help books or in, different kinds of places. But what you hear is, and what I would strongly recommend to people who are just starting their self-love journey, is keep a self-love journal. Okay. Just every night, every day, bullet out 3, 4, 5 things, as many things as you can, that you genuinely and sincerely love about yourself. It's not a snow job. So in the beginning, it might simply be, and I remember for me, this is what it was. I love that I'm trying to love myself. Okay, that's all I had. And I kept, so that's what I wrote for like 15 days in a row, was like, I'm trying to love myself. Okay, that's
Good
all
enough.
I got. And then eventually something bubbled up and I was like, oh, I do actually care about people. I genuinely care about people. I don't want anyone to be hurt. Even people that have hurt me, I don't want them to be hurt. I added that to the list. And then what I noticed was the more I did this with sincere heart, the list kept growing and growing and growing. I stayed off the things that seemed unlovable. And after a period of time of focusing all the things about myself that I genuinely loved and appreciated, when I looked back at the unlovable things or seemingly unlovable things, I even started to feel love for those things. So I would say things like, gosh, I hate the way I look and the way I talk and the way I walk. And after a period of time of focusing not on those things, but the other things that I genuinely loved, when I looked back, I said, I always thought I was the ugliest person in the world, but maybe I'm the second ugliest person in the world or whatever, right? So you just start realizing, oh my gosh, it's bleeding into this really positive, in this really positive way into the other areas of my life that I always thought were unlovable. That's like stage 1, okay? The deeper dive into self-love is then just becoming aware of the thoughts and feelings, sensations, and perceptions that you have without judgment, right? So another word for love is non-judgment. Just notice what you're thinking, what you're feeling, moment to moment, especially when you're triggered. Just notice it. Don't get in there and start judging, condemning, shaming yourself. Just notice and try to do the same thing with other people, okay? That's maybe step 2 is just a non-judgmental awareness. At some point, you then turn that awareness back on itself, right? So you come to realize, I'm noticing the thoughts and feelings I have without judgment, and I'm just breathing through it. And at some point you realize, well, what is it? How can I both be this awareness and what this awareness is aware of? So in other words, am I body and mind, or am I this thing that's aware of the body and mind? So you sort of turn the awareness back on itself and you're like, that's interesting. I keep shining this light of awareness on my thoughts and my feelings, perceptions, other people, and I do it non-judgmentally. And if I look or just notice that awareness itself, it already is full of peace and love and happiness. And so like a dimmer switch, the more we'll call it practicing the presence. You can call it practicing the presence of awareness, the presence of presence, or the presence of God, but it's just noticing the noticing. It's just being aware of the awareness. That in of itself is peace, love, and happiness that you're looking for. And when you spend more time just feeling that, sometimes I say just feel into the peace, soul, aliveness of your body. When you just feel that, it's like a dimmer switch that you turn up. And before long, it becomes your predominant experience. It takes the place in the foreground, whereas everything else goes to the background.
And that bleeds into every other aspect of your life too, because that scarcity mindset starts to subside and you start feeling the love. So therefore you're able to share it.
That's right.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think it's not about updating your profile. It's not about, swiping on the right day of the week. It is, coming with a full plate. And I 100% agree on that. But then the one thing, I'd love your thoughts on this, Rob, there's a line, right? You can work on yourself forever. You can be in like self-improvement mode, but then that's not necessarily like finding you or getting you to the place of what you're looking for. If you're looking for a romantic partner, and also it's never done, right? Like I even today am working on myself. It's not like a one and done thing. How do you balance the two? So you're not coming from this place of deficit, but also you're not just waiting forever for something to happen.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's just profound. What a profound question. Self-enjoyment. Okay. So if there's one thing that can be said about love, particularly in the beginning when you're dating, it's that it should be fun. If you really care about getting into a relationship, you really want to get in a relationship, you need to have fun. Okay. You need to have fun in the date. You need to have fun connecting with people, and you need to make fun a habit. It doesn't mean it has to be, rainbows and puppies and, amusement parks all the time. But I would say that if you can prioritize self-enjoyment over self-improvement, not only will you enjoy the experience, but you'll find yourself improving automatically, easily, and effortlessly, and without the judgment and condemnation that often ruins the self-improvement experience. So for instance, the more you enjoy, let's say, connecting with people, you'll find that your mood begins to just improve, right? And as your mood improves, you experience what's called broaden and build sort of experience, a psychological cap. So in other words, you start to see things that you didn't see before, opportunities that didn't exist before. And you start to think in ways that are much more creative. And suddenly what you discover is, I kind of like the way I dress, and I also like the way this other person dressed. I wonder if I could just add that little bit of something like that to my wardrobe, right? Or you say, I feel good about the way I look, but every now and then I feel like I could probably do a little something, improve my appearance. But it's not from a place of condemnation or a deficit-based place or none of that. It just comes because you're enjoying yourself so much and you get this creative little insider idea that maybe I'll just make this tiny little tweak. And it ends up being a significant tweak, right? So you're right. If you prioritize self-improvement over self-enjoyment, not only will you not enjoy yourself ever, rarely, okay, you also will not do a good job of improving yourself in meaningful ways. You'll do a lot of things that seem really important, but you really won't make the significant, meaningful difference, which is one ultimately in mood, or I'd call it a state of awareness, but it's that, right? If there's one thing that positive psychology has shared or revealed to us, it's that happy people are better lovers.
Yeah.
They're more attractive, literally and figuratively. They attract more people, and particularly happy people they attract more of. And they also attract better opportunities, better circumstances and conditions. They also get married earlier, stay married longer, and happy in all the relationships, whether they're married or not, right? So if there's something you want to improve your happiness. We'll call it self-enjoyment. But if you do that, I promise that will lead to all kinds of other improvements. And those improvements will not only be objective improvements, there'll be subjective improvements as well, right? So there'll be meaningful improvements, both in how you feel, but also how you show up in the world.
I'm so on board with that because I think there's so many self-improvement resources out there that some people feel like, well, I've reached the end. I've done everything I possibly could to improve myself. Why am I not getting the love that I deserve? And what you just described there, it's that it's an ongoing skill that we have to keep tapping into instead of thinking, this is the end of the line. I get a master's in happiness and I got love now. So I really enjoy listening to that. How would you address the people who feel like they had a great love that got away? I will never find a great love like this person again.
Well, it's a great reminder that the great love you're really speaking of, but might not know it, is of course yourself. There's that. So that experience came through you, and I don't know about you all, but maybe I know I've been in relationships before, you've dated someone before, and you maybe have romanticized the past, maybe a little or a lot. And then, 5 years, 10 years later, you reconnect with the person, you run into them, and you just think, what was I ever so interested in with that, right? And how were they? And you just think, wow, it's fascinating.
Yes, that's
if it was the person, wouldn't it still be that person? Wouldn't I still feel the same way? So the brain has this incredible ability to romanticize, can also catastrophize the past. But in this particular situation, the mind can run away from us. So I would say that ultimately, people and the world itself is not designed to make us happy or to make us feel love or loved all the time. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to lead you back to the source of love and happiness and peace that exists within yourself. So that great love you experienced, you think was a moment in time and was about a relationship, but it wasn't about some moment in time. It's about the timeless moment, which is the now. And it's about the relationship that you have with yourself, not that person or anyone else. Ultimately, of course, that benefits everyone else. But really, the lesson learned there is I was able to experience the kind of love that to this day I still remember. And that love, the source of that love, exists within me all the time. What can I do to dive more deeply into that experience here and now? So instead of trying to get back into the past to relive that experience or, reach out into the future and live that experience in some future moment, how can I experience more of that right here and now? If I care about love in the future, how can I make love now a thing? How can I put more time and energy into love now? And the more you can love and enjoy this current moment, this present moment, the more you'll find, quote unquote, love showing up in the future over and over again, right? So if you care about the future being full of love, make this moment full of love.
Before we get into takeaways, I think this whole part around turning it to yourself and love being synonymous with yourself, we hear, all the time people frustrated in dating because no one, wants them, essentially. There's this feeling of needing to be chosen in dating, and it starts to make even the best of us, when it happens a lot, feel unlovable. What's kind of like a parting piece of advice you would have for someone that's in that state of feeling unlovable and not seeing the love within themselves?
Yeah. So people will always be very peoply, and people will always disappoint you. And that's not because they're disappointing. It's just that no one can possibly keep up this game of loving you more than they love themselves for very long, right? And so if you're looking or hoping that you'll experience this kind of lasting, meaningful, and abiding love that you ultimately after, just look at the ways and the people in your life that have done nothing but disappoint you in that way. So I met a great, for 10 years when I was trying to go to business, when I was going to business school, I was trying to pay for it. And I worked in an entertainment business, and I was doing modeling jobs. And mostly it meant I was unemployed. I mean, booked some great jobs, but also, it's a hard business. And I had a photographer early on that said, Rob, what makes for a great or spectacular picture, don't you? I said, no, I don't. What is it? He said, every great picture makes a promise that it cannot keep. And I would argue that every experience, condition, circumstance, and person in the world, very well intentioned, makes a promise that it cannot keep. And the truth is, that's a great service to you. That does a great justice to you. It would be a much greater inservice and injustice if people made you dependent on them by loving you exactly the way you want to be loved at all points in time, because you would be led away from the very source of peace, love, and happiness within you. And so it's not the world's job, and the world will always suck at making you feel what you want to feel, and other people will always suck at making you feel what you want to feel. And so it's not the world's job, it's not other people's job. And when the world or other people do a good job of that, we say we love them. But in lots of ways, they're actually doing us a great injustice because they're leading us away from the very source of peace, love, and happiness that exists within you. So it may not feel like a gift at all right now, but I promise you it's a major gift to not feel loved or not feel lovable, and to not find someone who, quote unquote, chooses you as a romantic partner is a huge gift, because it's giving you opportunity to see through this illusion and through this matrix and through this false promise that the world and other people make, which is, I will make you happy forever. I will make you feel loved forever. That's bull-ish, right? It's bullish. It's not, I'm going to say it expletive, but it is. It's just not healthy, and it's not happy, and it's not a way to experience the kind of love you're ultimately after.
I love that so much. And I think it's a great segue into takeaways, which has been such a fantastic conversation. I mean, what I'm gathering is, oftentimes we think self-love is selfish. But in theory, it's actually, first of all, it's like the number one necessity in life, I would say, from what we're talking about. And if you do not have that within yourself, it doesn't mean that it detracts from your love to others. If anything, it allows you to give more love into the world. And, we talk about this a lot. It's like so often we're so outcome focused. We want to skip to the end. We want everything to go a certain way, but just enjoying all these moments and seeing them, like the example you just gave, it's like, even when things don't go our way, how is that going to shape who we are and where we go in life? Like, all of that is a gift if we choose to see it that way. So, I feel like love is so romanticized of being this romantic love, but what I've gathered from this conversation is, it is so much more, and it all starts within.
Ooh. You should host a really popular and profound podcast of some kind.
Called DATEABLE.
Oh, interesting.
Isn't
that
love,
interesting?
right?
Touche. I just love what you said. I think you're just spot on.
This love conversation just makes me feel so warm, because it makes me feel like I have so much more love to give. Reminder, because there are days that I'm like, I just have nothing left in me. I need some love right now, but I have nothing left in me to give. And if we are putting the onus on ourselves as a source of love, I can turn that around and say, actually, I do. I do have love to give. And it's not depleted in any means. I think this self-love journal is fantastic, because sometimes we talk about self-love as like going to the spa and getting a manicure, which I guess is a form of self-love, but it's not a belief of self-love. Self-love journal plants a seed for love. So it almost forces you to see it from a love perspective, as opposed to what is depleting you in your daily life. And I really believe that sharing the love does beget more love. I wholeheartedly believe this, and I've shared this with Julie too. I have this friend named May, and she is just the most loving person I know, even though she doesn't come from love. She attracts people who leech off of her, who take from her, but she doesn't see it that way. She chooses to see as she's got so much love to give that she can share with whoever comes into her life. And for so long, I was like, she's being taken advantage of. I need to sit down with her and talk to her about all the people who are taking her energy. But I think after this conversation, I can see it from her perspective, where if you choose to see love, it is there. And if you choose to share it, then you'll just see more of it. And wouldn't we want to spread more of the love as opposed to being petty about it like I used to be?
Oh, I feel that. I love that so much. Can I just add a comment? Because it was just so beautiful what you shared, what you both shared there. So you're both absolutely right. We're all sort of trust fund babies walking around with this unlimited inheritance of love inside, and we don't know it. Okay. So we're all these trust fund babies, these like kings and queens and prince and princesses, and we've fallen asleep and dreamed that we're beggars, okay? And we're in this dream out there in the world trying to find love everywhere, within everyone else, forgetting all along that we're these trust fund babies. We have this infinite source of love and peace and happiness inside us. So that's one, to your point there, Julie. And the other thing, love is formless ultimately, right? It's formless. And it can take any form. And it's important to remember that, because sometimes we think that like happiness, it has to have this huge, big, smiley face plastered all over it, or that it has to come with chocolate and, flowers, or that we have to give all our money. It doesn't mean that. Sometimes it might mean you're taking a nap. Because whether that love is shining or focused or sort of channeled to someone else or ourselves, it's still love, right? So there's that. Second, if nothing else, kind of remember, as you said there, like love isn't a state of mood or a state of emotion. Sometimes you feel it that way. Just by dropping your judgment about yourself or about other people, about life or the world itself, you're already dropping into love, to the kind of state of awareness of love that I've been referring to, like, and we've been talking about during this podcast. Like, you don't have to go do things that you feel bad for doing in the name of love, just to be a loving person. Just notice the thoughts that bring you so much pain and suffering. Just drop that. You're already a source for good. You're already a source for love just by doing that.
I love that. I think, we all need to find love in all the places that exist in everyday life and every moment. What you said earlier of, even if this podcast never airs, what I'm gaining from this moment. And I think that is something that I'm going to take to heart, because I'm always like trying to go a few steps ahead, but that's what makes our, memories and our feelings and our learnings and all the things.
Touche. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Another way to find love is in your book, Love from the Inside Out.
Yes.
And your forward is from Vanessa Williams, the queen herself. That's amazing. And where can people find your book, Rob?
Yeah, you can find it everywhere great books are sold, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart. Those are probably the best places. Banyan Books, Mango Books.
And if people want to find out more about you?
Yeah, if you want to find out more about me, you can find me at my website at coachrobmack.com. You can also find me on all social media platforms, probably most consistently Instagram at Rob Mack, Mack official.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us, Rob. I feel like we need to have you back for, another one. I still have so many thoughts and questions, but this is always so enlightening to have you as a guest. So thank you.
It is truly like my honor, and I mean this. You all are always so gracious with me. You're so generous with me, and you're so loving with me. And so I feel like I need to add a chapter or two just to pay homage to the both of you. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for having me in the conversation, and thank you for being so kind to me. I appreciate it.
A forward by Vanessa Williams and an addendum by the Dateable
There
Podcast.
you go.
I
Boom.
think that sounds like a great way to close out a book.
There it is. There it is. That's right.
We're going to sandwich there.
That's right.
Also, just want to say, for everyone listening, thank you so much for listening. I hope you all felt the love from this episode. We certainly did. And if you did feel the love, give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. 5 stars, maybe a little something nice. We always love that, because we do reciprocate that love with good content each and every week.
But you don't even need to. It just makes you feel good,
yeah.
right?
I mean,
to
we
put
don't
that out
expect
into the universe.
But it does make the world go around if you do. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this episode. Stay dateable.
The Dateable Podcast is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts.
Want to continue the conversation? First, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter with the handle @Dateable Podcast. Tag us in any post with the hashtag StayDateable, and trust us, we look at all of those posts. Then head over to our website, dateablepodcast.com. There you'll find all the episodes as well as articles, videos, and our coaching service with vetted industry experts. You can also find our premium Why series where we dissect, analyze, and offer solutions to some of the most common dating conundrums. We're also downloadable for free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Overcast, Stitcher Radio, and other podcast platforms. Your feedback is valuable to us, so don't forget to leave us a review. And most importantly, remember to stay dateable.